Don't act surprised, you know exactly what you did.
Is there nothing out of this group of people, there's nothing that you want to know?
Don't stand outside. I'll call you back in when you're actually going to be quiet.
How stressed is your school? Are there days when you dream of never having to set foot in school again? All this week, we're conducting an ambitious scientific experiment to measure levels of stress across one school. It's Thursday today, day 4, and this van is operating as our observational hide, where we can actually look at teachers and school staff as they work. Leading psychologists, physiologists, neurologists and educationalists will be trialling an intelligent vest, which reveals live stress levels through instant readings of the teachers' heart and breathing rates. We'll also be measuring their levels of cortisol, the fight or flight hormone. Never before in a normal population have scientists tried to establish if your DNA can make you stress-prone, but our team will be attempting just that. And in yet another world first, we'll be monitoring and recording our teachers' blood pressure every 15 minutes throughout the school day, so our experts can pinpoint extra stressful moments. The 1,000 pupils and 100 staff at King's Langley Secondary School, Hertfordshire, will serve as guinea pigs in our testbed laboratory. Identified as an underperforming school 4.5 years ago, it's now the second most improved school in England. Gary Lewis has led the school through its renaissance.
Myself and the staff had committed wholeheartedly to the recovery of this school, and inevitably the worry that came about following that inspection or during that inspection was huge. So I would not wish to repeat that.
While the entire school will be involved, some staff have agreed to be more closely monitored for stress than others by our experts who've come from all across Europe. Now, before we move on, I should tell you that something unexpected has happened. It's 8:30 and the fire alarm has just gone off, and that's before registration, which doesn't happen until 8:40. So the teachers and staff, as you can imagine, are trying to round up children, but they don't really know who's here yet. Alom Shah is out on the tennis courts finding out how they're coping.
Do you think it's going to add to your stress or the stress of the other teachers?
It doesn't help. It's disruption. It's a pretty well organised setup, as you can see. We've got 1,000 kids and 65 teaching staff out here, plus all our administrative staff.
And us lot.
And you lot as well, which is clearly not reducing anybody's stress, I have to say.
How long will this go on for?
Well, registration is 20 minutes. As soon as they're registered and we've given the all clear, we can get everybody back into the school and get them warmed up.
Today we have two very different teachers who've agreed to let us follow them around. One is fairly new to teaching in this country and as a scientist can be in charge of large classes and dangerous equipment and chemicals. The other is a Renaissance man. He teaches music, IT and lower ability maths, as well as being an assistant head.
Hi, Hermione.
Hi Alom, so you're back. You still got some eyebrows, so was the fire alarm a false alarm?
Apparently a technical fault with the alarm system, and no truth to the rumours that the production crew did it for the cameras.
Right, okay, we weren't trying to induce extra stress, honest. So what's coming up in today's show?
We've finally got some cortisol results back, and Dr. Angela Clough is going to help us analyse those. We've also got a speech and voice expert who's going to watch our teachers and see if she can pick up any signs of stress from their voices.
It's now 9 a.m. and our physics teacher, Tamara Gazarian, is in her lab trying to infuse some year 10s.
Which one should get hotter more quickly? That. Why not that one?
That one will reflect all the...
Good. Perfect, you got it. Okay, so just record your results.
Joining us today, we have consultant speech and language therapist Christella Antoni. And Christella does a lot of work with teachers who come to her with damaged voices. Now, Christella, welcome to our observational hide. From looking at Tamara and the way that she's using her voice, do you think you might be seeing her as one of your patients in 10 years' time?
I have a feeling not, because she seems to be doing a lot of things right.
What kind of material did he use to test? What was the experiment? What was he doing?
Because she is a Canadian lady. She has high vowels and an element in her voice which is twang, which is fantastic for carrying. So her vowels are somewhere up there and they kind of bounce off the roof of her mouth. That will always carry acoustically much more than a voice that was produced much lower in the throat and didn't get right up into the face area.
Okay.
Right.
And that's quite common. Or people who had very round vowels in English, perhaps, sometimes you have more jaw opening. And even though that's a clear voice, it's quite hard to get that up into that really sharp area.
Thanks, Christella. Well, Tamara's only been in Britain for the last 2 years, so she's had some pretty big life changes to cope with. That could have induced some stress. But before we go back to her class, let's see how she sees herself.
My name is Tamara Gazarian, and I'm a science teacher here at King's Langley School, and I specialize in teaching physics for Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5. The schooling that I'm used to is in Canada, in Ontario in particular, and each province has their own education system there. Primary school goes straight from about year 1 to about year 7, 8, around there. So I personally was never used to teaching such young kids coming in at year 7, year 8.
Tamara Gazarian joined us as a supply teacher over a year ago as that rare breed of physicist. They simply do not exist.
I mean, the behavior of the kids here are actually they're not really that bad, but compared to what I'm used to at home, it's very, very different.
For any supply teacher, they will always state that their biggest concern is the behavior of the youngsters.
Dale, out. Don't act surprised. You know exactly what you did. Get out. Go sit in Mr. Iqbal's room.
I would definitely say from starting with this job, I've probably been a little bit more prone to stress than before, but I'm actually surprised myself sometimes at what I don't get stressed about.
I know it's learning. I'm sorry, but I'm not just going to give you this for fun. Good. Where did it react the most?
She enjoyed the school so much, and we enjoyed having her so much, that I offered her a contract. So she's no longer a supply teacher, she's actually a fully employed member of this school.
Well, I'm now joined by Angela Clow, a psychophysiologist and expert in assessing levels of stress through cortisol. And Nadia Wager is with us, our expert on blood pressure for the week. Well, Angela, tell me, how is cortisol a measure of stress? What is cortisol?
Cortisol is a hormone, and it's an essential hormone for life. Without it, we'd be dead. And it's got a pivotal role controlling a whole host of physiological systems. It's like the conductor of an orchestra. Right. It regulates the immune system, cardiovascular system, so your heart and your blood pressure, how you metabolize your food and things like that. But superimposed upon that, you have this second role, which is a stress hormone. So when we as human beings perceive something out there as a negative event, a threat to self, something novel and threatening, then you produce an added spurt of cortisol.
And is that something that happens immediately in the body, or does it take a while?
After you perceive the event, it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for the cortisol levels to be raised.
Okay, now Alam, you've been running around the school all week collecting samples. Has that made you a popular person?
Well, the teachers have grown to deeply dislike me because at the end of every lesson I've been asking them to chew on one of these, and just to show solidarity with them, I did chew one myself, and it is like chewing an old sock.
Well, Angela, cortisol is a very reliable indicator of stress. Why is that?
Cortisol secretion superimposed upon the normal levels is only going to happen if people perceive negative events, not if they are in a pressure situation that they perceive as positive.
Right, okay.
Now, when you look at other physiological markers of stress, for example, heart rate, although it can be very, very useful when you're observing the behaviour, you can't always tell whether it's stress-related because your heart rate goes up when you're excited and you're looking forward to something and you're having a thrill. Cortisol only really goes up in a negative threat situation.
Okay, Alam, tell us how the results are going. What have we got? What are we still waiting for?
Well, we've already got results back from Monday's volunteers. That's Helen and Karen.
Karen Bird, our English teacher, and Helen Goodchild, the teaching assistant.
Yes. We wanted to look at how these people's cortisol patterns looked at a weekend when they're not at work. Right? And then we've contrasted that with a work day.
How did they do in the daytime then?
Well, Karen, it was a very interesting profile in that the highest levels here are at 8 o'clock in the morning before she even starts her class. Right? Now, I would interpret this as some sort of anticipatory dread about what is coming up in the day ahead. Her levels here are in the almost extreme range, and they're about 10 times higher than they should be under these situations.
Right, okay, so Karen really started off high.
Yes.
What about Helen? How did her day do?
Is actually remarkably, she's less of this anticipatory stress, and she does recover very rapidly to below her weekend levels within half an hour, even though she's in the classroom situation. But we have this fascinating peak of cortisol levels at about 12 o'clock, which I think, Nadia...
We also had in the blood pressure as well, which was actually when Helen was participating in the psychometric test of drawing round the perimeter of a star, but only able to see the star as a mirror image rather than actually looking at her hand properly.
You know, that's the difference between human stress and animal stress. We share the stress response systems, but in humans it's psychosocial stress, right? She wasn't being chased by a lion or anything really stressed. You know, doing it's not going to damage her, but her perception of it and her vulnerability is exposed there.
What if you were to find a teacher whose cortisol levels remained high? Would that be something to worry about?
This would ring alarm bells with me. And this is when a person's stress can have an impact on your health.
Thanks, Angela. It's 9:40 a.m. and Assistant Head Chris Pearce has had a relatively easy time of it so far today because his first lesson was free. Now, Chris is a very experienced teacher, so does that mean he's laid back and not stressed? Well, let's find out.
It's the multifaceted nature of the job. It's keeping so many balls in the air at once, really. I mean, there's a teaching commitment, line management of a number of learning areas, a complete key stage, plus the things that you can't predict, the pastoral issues, the personnel issues. Quite frequently, a whole day will be wiped out by something that you couldn't predict, couldn't see coming.
Chris's biggest problem is he can't switch off. He's so determined to do well that he can't actually work any less than he does. And it's something I'm going to have to manage, and I'm going to tell him, work less in order to work better.
I teach maths. I'm only teaching lower ability groups in years 9 and years 10, and working with them to get the highest attainment that I can out of them. Oh, I think I do get stressed. I don't also necessarily think that's a bad thing. If I'm, for example, teaching a class of students, I want to be slightly stressed. I want to be alert, I want to be aware of what's going on in all parts of the classroom and what's going on outside the classroom and what situations those kids have brought in with them. So rather than stress, I'd use the word focus, really. I want to be alert and on the ball all the time.
Well, I'm now joined by Jill Jordan. Welcome, Jill. Jill's a former head teacher and now expert in change. Now, Jill, do you think it's important or useful for school staff to find out about their physiological indicators and how they're reacting to stress?
It could be useful to predict maybe those teachers who have a propensity or maybe experiencing burnout on the inside but not showing it on the outside.
And sometimes people are quite shocked to realise that the way they feel psychologically can be picked up physiologically. But there's quite clear roots between the brain, how you feel, your emotion and your body. And if you can measure those bodily responses, it can form a type of biofeedback. So the person can then have something to strive for to improve that negative physiological process. And therefore they can make themselves get better. Yeah. Realistically, it's not likely they can monitor their own cortisol, but blood pressure would be a good marker, wouldn't it?
Although actually people actually think that they can ascertain what their blood pressure is, but they often get it wrong. So they'll think that because they were angry and shouting, their blood pressure was high, but in fact it goes sort of somewhat lower than if you're angry and holding it in. And so if you're appearing to be calm, but in fact inside sort of actually seething, your blood pressure's higher at that point. So I've had it where people have actually misjudged quite often.
Well, it's just gone 10 a.m. and Chris has joined the senior management meeting. Alon determinedly collects a saliva sample from Chris.
Got to chill one of these.
I'm just drinking a cup of tea, does that matter?
Yes, it does, yeah. Bad man.
Well, shall I do it halfway through?
You've probably ruined my experiment. Weeks and weeks of planning, all down the toilet.
Experiment?
Yeah.
These can be pretty stressful, can't they?
They can. The idea is you sit and look calm and you join in with the conversation, but what's going on inside your head is, have I said what I wanted to say?
Now, conscious of the time, we've got 20 minutes. I'd like to, at some point, give feedback while it's fresh in the mind about the ICT conference. Chris and I can do that as a double activity. Many of you probably haven't examined it in detail, I guess.
Now I did notice there that Chris's heart rate went up a bit.
Yes.
Jill, any reason that you could see?
Yes, as the head suggested that he and Chris were going to do a joint feedback on the ICT conference, Chris's face definitely looked like I wasn't expecting that. Oh.
And his heart rate did jump
It
about
did.
20 beats per minute,
It
didn't it?
did.
We're up at 94 now.
Yes, and it's remained with him, that actually, interestingly.
He has a lot on his plate. We'll have an even better idea of what's on Chris's plate when we reveal the results of the questionnaires that he and all his colleagues have filled in. Both of today's teachers have waived their right to anonymity. And we also have permission to reveal their propensity to stress as shown by their genotype. Well, we're now joined by Chris Gibbons from Queen's University Belfast. And Chris, you've been masterminding our investigations into our teachers' psychological views about stress through questionnaires and something about their DNA. Tamara, our physics teacher, what is her questionnaire showing, first of all?
Right, well, in terms of her coping style, she taps into support systems very well. She's very good at what we call positive reframing. So she's very good at kind of looking at problems and framing them in such a way that she can kind of see the positive side of them and deal with them better. She plans very well. She's quite good on the active coping side. And what also led me to conclude that she probably would be quite healthy on the well-being measures is that the negative coping side is very low. She uses very few of the ineffective coping strategies.
Okay, well, the other teacher who we've been following is Chris Pearce, the assistant head.
He's using a wide range of coping strategies very effectively. So he was high on the active planning, he was high on the kind of just do it type of coping, planning ahead, using good sense of humour, all important.
Yeah, we've seen him laughing quite a lot.
Yeah. And actually he was very high on his religious beliefs. People who do have some belief system that helps them make sense of the stresses and the problems they experience, it often helps them frame those problems in such a way that it helps put it in perspective.
Wow, so we've got the questionnaire, the end of the autumn term, the beginning of the Christmas term, that's their own perceptions,
Yes.
and then this genotype.
Yes. We found with Chris that he inherited the genotype, which meant that he had quite a hardy disposition, an anxious, resistant disposition. That's interesting because he also uses lots of coping strategies. Theoretically, you would have thought if you had that anxious, resistant disposition that you may not feel a need to use as many of these coping strategies. And yet we also find he is actually quite high on the emotional exhaustion measure. He would be categorised as high.
Well, we've heard about Chris' questionnaire DNA, we've had Tamara's questionnaire, but what about Tamara's DNA?
Tamara's DNA, she was the more of the anxious prone type.
Right. That's not something I would have expected just from observing her in the classroom, actually.
Yeah, also we see that on her emotional exhaustion level, she's very low on that. You know, compared to Chris, she's markedly lower and markedly lower than the other teachers we've seen who've been at the high level.
Well, it'll be good to draw all these results together on Friday and get an overall picture.
Thank you.
11 a.m. and Chris has transformed from senior manager to year 9 maths teacher. His lower ability group don't appear very motivated.
Favourite pet? Yeah? What pets they've got, yeah? Okay. Jack? Favourite radio station? Okay, Shauna? Right, so we've got colour, we've got eye colour. So we need to think of a question for you two. Is there nothing out of this group of people, there's nothing that you want to know about this group of people?
When the activity doesn't appear to be matched to the ability of the children you're working with, it's much more difficult to engage them. Chris obviously has an expectation of what he wants out of the lesson, but I'm not sure that the students do. And that mismatch, the more you press on, the more you try and get that engagement with the pupils, the more stressful it becomes.
But I want you actually working with each other and actually asking the questions, yeah? You've got 5 minutes to get these filled in, starting from now.
I mean, he's experiencing, I would say, a little bit of frustration trying to get the class motivated to do the task.
Yeah, you can include yourself and include me. No one's asked me yet.
At the end of the lesson, Alon collects yet another of Chris's saliva samples. This will be analysed for its cortisol levels.
Hello, sir.
Oh, you're right.
How are you?
Yeah, great.
You got a spit sample for me?
Oh,
It's just behind you.
What, my career? Where is it?
There, by your tape
Oh, yeah.
left.
That's fine.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I've chewed it.
Yeah, your ones,
Before I drink my tea.
your ones always look dirtier than everyone else's.
It's because I am, I'm afraid. It's years of strong coffee done that.
It's 1:45 and having just gulped down a quick sandwich, Christella has caught up with Tamara in her lab.
You have a very, very good voice, so it does, I think, motivate the children. But one thing about the facial expression was quite flat.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, which you wouldn't expect because
You
your
never
voice
look
is,
at yourself.
No, and your voice is never flat. So I think if there was a bit more animation in terms of perhaps a light smile, holding a light smile and using your eyes a bit more to express, that would be another way of engaging the children. And the benefit of holding a light smile, or even a big smile actually, is that it opens the larynx up.
Okay, I shall give it a try.
Lunchtime is nearing its end, but Alom is still on the go. More results from Tuesday's and Wednesday's cortisol tests have just come through. He's busy checking them to see whether they seem to match the other psychological and physiological data. OK, so what do they show?
Well, it's very interesting. There seems to be a gender bias, and we might have predicted that, actually.
Jeff Shepherd.
Jeff
OK,
Shepherd.
he was our PE and geography teacher. He's very experienced. He's been teaching for 20 years, but...
Outwardly very calm.
Outwardly, that's very interesting because, as in some of the people, nearly all of the people, we see this expectation, this anxiety, that anticipation at the beginning with very high cortisol levels in the morning. His are really very, very high for a sustained period of time in the morning.
Right, okay.
So it wasn't just a momentary sort of stress response, it's more sustained than that and a bit more worrying. And he maintains this for over 2 hours, these very high levels. So just to put some numbers on that, we're talking about 30 units and it should be about 5 units. It's not all bad news because he does drop remarkably quickly, and back after this particular stressful period here, he does recover and regain normative values. Yeah.
Now, what was going on in Jeff's morning to explain that?
Well, what happened yesterday morning, if you remember, it was snowing, and so their lesson plans changed very drastically. They had to move out of the field and into a gym, and then he had to share the gym with James, and it was a very crowded lesson. I don't know if that could explain it.
Yes.
James Dyson.
Okay. Now,
our relatively new PE teacher again.
Okay. Well, what we have here is someone who's more reactive to events as they come along during the day. Again, he's very resilient. He goes up, but he comes down very quickly. So he's responding to negative events, but recovering in good time.
Okay.
And then by the end of the afternoon, he's in his normal comfort zone, the weekend zone as well.
Okay, and we've also got more data.
Yeah, when we look at Liz, she's got a very similar profile actually to Helen that we looked at earlier in the
Okay, now this is Liz Shipp, media studies teacher, hasn't been at the school very long.
Yes, but I would predict that she is actually quite a confident and competent teacher, because apart from this 8:30 very high measure here, which we think is associated with the anticipation and the novelty and all the unknown that she's going to enter into the day, she's actually tracking quite well over the day.
Now, what about our final teacher, Emily?
Oh, Emily, here we are. Again, not such a marked anticipatory response at 8 o'clock in the morning, actually quite well controlled. So congratulations to Emily, I think. She seems to be very confident and perceiving things in a generally positive way.
As an overview, what have you kind of noticed about all this information?
Well, actually, I've been rather pleasantly surprised. I don't know if it's your selection procedures really, but the teachers are responding when appropriately to their stressors, I think, has been identified by people observing them on the ground. One other thing I have picked up is there are gender differences, and it seems that the men seem to be more reactive to the stress than the females. The females tend to have more of the anticipatory stress than the males. So whether or not that would pan out with larger numbers, I don't know, but that's what I've picked up.
Thanks, Angela. Well, it's after lunch now, and Tamara's teaching one of the biggest and most demanding classes of her day. It's Year 10. They're learning all about infrared radiation.
I know you guys can do well, okay? I know sometimes you've got your moments, but honestly, if I see any person in this room, okay, abuse the equipment, hit each other.
She comes across as somebody that would just speak her mind, and so I should imagine students know exactly where they stand with her, which is always quite reassuring.
Yeah, the boundaries are quite clear, I think.
Guys, all I've asked you to do is sort yourselves out. I've got 1, 2, right? 3, 4, 5. What's going on here? 6, 7. There's 2 groups. Show me a clear divide in the back row. Okay, that makes more sense. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Brendan, I'm this close to sending you out. Stop throwing that.
Wow, quite a lot of organisational stress, I would suggest. Isn't it funny, when the focus of the class is physics, this seems to be the most difficult time.
Have you got your water? Yeah. Okay, have you taken your initial measurements? Yeah. So you're about ready to time it? Shh, guys. Excuse me.
That wasn't me.
I saw you do that.
And you did it as well.
All right.
Everyone was doing it.
Well, you know what? You can explain that to Mr. Iqbal. Come.
Her heart rate up around the 105 mark, a little bit elevated.
Yeah, I think it is that losing control of the class again once you get them to move around. It's the uncertainty, you don't know quite what's going to happen, they're not doing quite as they're told. You've got the group at the back.
We have about 5 minutes, not even left. So I'd like you to start to pack up, tidy up. Okay, Bunsen burners out. Please close them from the valve.
We're getting towards the end of day 4 here, but Tamara still has her cortisol swabs to take.
What was going on there last end of day trouble?
Well, I mean, again, period 5 is always a bit of a tricky issue with some of the kids. I mean, even if they're nice kids, sometimes at the end of the day, and they just, won't have it. They were having fun with the ultraviolet pens, but again, I got a few of them that one girl was a bit upset because apparently somebody had written something on her back, which I told them that they needed to treat each other with respect. And because of that now, I'm not doing a practical with them next week, and they've got to earn their right to have another practical. So there's no way I'm going to tolerate that in the class, because it's not appropriate. But what can you do?
You're going to have to help me with my practical again.
No problem.
Right, there you go.
Okay.
Chewing that again. That's the last one, you'll be glad to know.
Okay.
So what have we learnt today? The main revelation has been the cortisol results. These largely supported yesterday's blood pressure findings. The main surprise was that young teachers often had lower levels of the stress hormone, and that the women had higher anticipatory stress peaks at the start of the teaching day than the men. Well, thank you all very much for your contributions today. It's been really great to have you on the programme. I know you're all coming back tomorrow, so I look forward to it. Tomorrow, Friday, it's the grand finale of our experiment, and we'll be drawing together all the results that we've gathered over the week in a lively debate.
Chris still working away in there. He wants to be out of here by 10 o'clock because that's when I'm locking up tonight. He normally works till about then.